Should you go in blind? A question best asked in relation to video games and best avoided in relation to Mexican brothels. Going in blind in Dark Souls or Elden Ring means walking into a fog, or turning a corner, or dropping off a ledge you weren't sure about and finding something you had no idea was there. A hidden merchant, an NPC with an esoteric questline, a weapon that by any standards not Japanese would look deranged, and yet you still have very little idea whether it's good or not. That right there was wonder. Organically harvested and shot straight into your veins. But it might be going extinct. Being in my early 30s, I could be considered decidedly ancient by the standards of your average second monitor YouTube slop bringer. And as such, I bore witness to a reorganization of the relationship between games and the player's consumption of games in the increasingly digital age. That is to say, the transition from the bright-eyed, hope-filled, exploratory question of what will I find to the austere, no-nonsense transactional inquiry of what is the most efficient way to finish this. This evolution of engagement is one I found most visible and actively participate in myself in the aforementioned excellent From Soft games, where creator Hidetaka Miyazaki has built their reputation on the pillars of esotericism, difficulty, and the rewarding feeling of organically discovering at least 12 different greatswords. Will I do another Schweihunter run? Why yes, I might just do that. And it is in this game lineage, now known as Soulsborne, with Elden Ring being the most successful of them all, where players are thrust into hostile, dank environments with minimal direction, forced to piece together the narrative through cryptic item descriptions and NPCs seemingly as useless as they are jolly. Over the years, however, the scale of both the game world and the proliferation of digital information worlds like Fextra Life have created somewhat of a paradox. While Miyazaki champions the philosophy of the universal difficulty level, where each and every player finds their own level and method of overcoming challenges, such as summoning someone else to do the boss fight, summoning an NPC to do the boss fight, or speccing intelligence. It seems us players have increasingly gravitated towards a culture of optimization, defined by early OP guides, comprehensive questline wikis, and a mathematical obsession with soft caps, poise values, and hyper armor. What the fuck is hyper armor? Between fair trade, cruelty-free organic discovery versus efficient stem lord optimization, the foundations of the former seems to be what Miyazaki desires. Soulsborne design ethos is centered on his belief that overcoming challenges by learning something in a game is a very rewarding feeling, making Miyazaki the only game director to ever utter the phrase, "The intent is to provide players with a sense of pride and accomplishment without immediately being pelted with rotten eggs and tomatoes." The learning process of a Soulsborne game is intended to be experiential, where your personal growth is measured by your skill and game knowledge, rather than just your character's level and equipment stats. Take for instance ceaseless discharge in Dark Souls 1. Higher level and better equipment would absolutely help you survive hits and defeat him faster, but with enough skill and time on your hands, you could just as well defeat him with your fists, having never leveled up, or with enough game knowledge and experimentation, you would know to trigger an alternate strategy where the boss essentially commits Sudoku without you ever really being put in harm's way. That's not to say that every Soulsborne boss has a trigger state for an instant kill, nor that levels or equipment are irrelevant, but to say that every boss can be defeated in a myriad of ways by a myriad of different characters character levels, player skill caps, and degrees of equipment. Remember kids, fashion souls is more important than meta. In other RPGs and even action RPGs, levels and equipment are alpha and omega for your success. Not to take away the skill cap necessary in games like World of Warcraft or Diablo, but these are games where a slightly different colored rat in a slightly different colored level zone can one-shot you because you didn't spend 5 days farming Cairn Bloodhoof's prostate wrecker before venturing into the area 1.5 level too high for you. These types of games are like comparing apples to oranges, yet the user discussion seems to be identical in many ways. Soulsborne games have no difficulty option for the same reason. A singular difficulty level brings, as Miyazaki says, everyone to the same level of discussion and the same level of enjoyment. By forcing every player to face the same obstacles with the same potential solutions, your triumph belongs only to your personal approach, whether that's pure skill, game knowledge, or farming mobs to level vigor or vitality. However, the modern reality of capital G gaming discourse suggests that his same level of discussion is being fundamentally altered by the sheer availability of information. Miyazaki himself acknowledges this, noting that he expects players to consult guides and secrets within their communities. He views this as a perfectly valid playstyle, yet he maintains that the games are not designed with guides as a prerequisite. The game design foundation dating back to Demon's Souls and Dark Souls 1 was catered to the players who wanted to go through the world completely blind. But Miyazaki also admits that if such a player cannot succeed, it represents room for improvement on our behalf. Is this drive towards efficiency solely the result of gaming culture changing? Players like myself may be becoming a little more lazy, seeking the path of least resistance, or have Soulsborne games propagated this culture themselves? I'll be honest, I completely understand this almost defensive reaction to the game's own architecture. If you omit traditional quest markers, journals, and a map that provides explicit directions, sure, the game forces you to pay close attention to the world and its inhabitants, to listen and learn, rather than relying on post-dialogue journals. But this lack of guidance can also become too punitive. Soulsborne game's non-linear narrative is designed to be pieced together like a puzzle, but when quest NPCs move across the map, die seemingly at random, locks you out of progression due to what feels like unrelated actions, and basically forces you to perform another 50 or 60 hour playthrough before you can potentially organically reach the conclusion of an NPC questline. Yeah, there might be room for improvement. It's all well and fine to claim that they obviously understand players using guides, but don't make or plan anything with that as a prerequisite and then release Dark Souls 1 DLC with an official guide on their webpage on how to even access your purchased content because it is so well hidden. Same goes for quests in Elden Ring. Millicent is going on a journey. Great! A journey to where? Fucking Narnia? At least Alexander, the best bro of them all, tells you exactly where he is going. A massive improvement over previous games, but he is one of the few exceptions in a long line of non-sequitur cryptic questlines dating back to Solaire and forgetting to kill a very specific invertebrate before progressing to a very specific point in the game. Obviously, you don't need to complete any NPC quests to literally complete the game, so technically, yeah, you can complete the game blind, but can you blame players for wanting to engage with the interesting setting that you've established and get their money's worth on what is potentially their only playthrough in the game before returning to adult life? The allure of organic discovery is replaced by the anxiety of potential loss. Players are pushed towards wikis and YouTube, not because they want to skip the game, but because they want to ensure that they can fully experience it. The paradox here is that by trying to keep the player immersed in the world through the lack of UI, we are forced out of the game world and into a web browser, into a Millicent questline guide, and then maybe into a goon sesh as well. But I blame that one on Selen. Likewise, the same culture exists around optimizing your character, your builds, your equipment. Discussions about stat allocations, various soft cap breakpoints, and some such will always exist. But when hidden stats like hyper armor and the mechanics of poise exists in the manner that they do, what else are we supposed to do but look up external guides? For poise, for instance, in Elden Ring functions as an invisible HP bar that determines a player's resistance to staggering. Unlike your actual health bar, this value is not directly visible and its regeneration rules are pretty non-intuitive. It does not regenerate slowly over time, but resets itself fully after 30 seconds of not taking damage. Outside of this, the breakpoints of 51 and 101 in poise are important to withstand at least one hit from an enemy at the low end. How were we ever supposed to know anything about this from organic experimentation? Once again, it's true that specific knowledge about poise breakpoints is not necessary to completing the game, but at some point, so much information from stats to quest lines is obscured from the player that willfully killing off mystery and discovery and experimentation in lieu of actually understanding what the hell this stat or that stat means becomes the default. For many players, understanding these systems is the difference between combat gameplay that feels responsive and combat gameplay that feels random. When you get staggered mid-swing for the 4th time by a standard enemy skeleton for reasons undiscernible to you, and someone tells you to look up the soft cap for poise breakpoints and to use one of the few armor sets with good breakpoints, they are in fact not ruining your immersion, they are solving a problem that the game itself created and refused to explain. There is a reason why, for years, the community genuinely debated whether poise was functioning at all. This is only compounded with the increased complexity of the bosses in later Soulsborne games. Obviously, every single boss can still be defeated using only your bare fist and bare buttocks and bare skill. But it does feel like we are being pushed towards the same build guidelines, the same armor for specific poise, a consensus correct way to spec and correct equipment to use. And I am a sinner, a perpetrator myself. I intend to throw no stones sitting in my glass cardboard box, busking 2 chains bars for pennies. I would have never ever considered using a starter weapon in Dark Souls throughout the entire game if I hadn't looked up guides and OP builds and found that the sellsword twin blades are an easy ticket to completely breaking PvE and to getting a grinder premium subscription. Even now, playing the relatively much easy and simpler Dark Souls 1, I couldn't help but googling the community consensus on a couple of different weapons. I'm not saying that everyone else is as uncreative, lazy or boring as myself, but you only have to look up the guide and build ecosystem to know that this is a thriving ecosystem. I don't want to invoke the slippery slope argument, but with quests being basically impossible to complete without guides, stats being impossible to understand without wikis, it is no wonder that once the dam of playing a Soulsborne game completely blind is broken, because you simply cannot find the albinoric woman, or you can't understand why your poise doesn't seem to do anything, the next logical step is to look up builds, secrets, get OP early guides, and so on and so forth. Once the blind playthrough becomes too obnoxious due to progression in a quest, for instance, why not play with both eyes open then? Why not check out a few guides or builds too? It could be cope from my end, since I'm apparently the type of capital G gamer that needs a YouTube video to to inform me that the weapon I'm currently using is actually good, instead of just relying on the fact that I love the moveset and that I'm progressing in the game be enough. Who knows, maybe I could squeeze out another 3% damage out on the margins on another weapon. And I don't believe that the erosion of wonder in Elden Ring is solely the fault of the wiki, the tuber, or the developer. It is the result of a clash between challenging game design and an age of total information. Overcoming difficult challenges by learning something yourself exists in tension with a game that is often too mechanically obscure for the average player to navigate alone, be it quests or hidden stats. The obsession with poise, values, meta builds, and precise guides is a logical response to a game that punishes ignorance with instant death or permanent quest failure. The optimization culture exists because Elden Ring and Dark Souls are genuinely difficult. And when something is difficult, humans look for the efficient solutions. Something has been lost. The blind game still exists, technically, for players willing to put their phone down. Fat chance, but it requires, for anyone not on the same esoteric wavelength of the Soulsborne quest designers, to pathologically ransack every part of the game world, rest 3 times at the bonfire, drink the potion that kills you 7 times, and not to progress too far, or you're going to be locked out of that particular NPC's story until your next 60-hour run. Is there really no room for a little balance? I don't mind the difficulty or the complexity as such. I love Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring above basically every other game not named Hearts of Iron 4 or Necopara. I just wish there was another avenue, an in-game one, of approaching and unveiling the NPC quests in the world and the more obscure stats that happen to provide a massive difference in your gameplay. I'm not asking for yellow paint, quest markers, or anything like that. Mystery is a virtue, but obfuscation is a deterrent.
Thank you. Now watch this dry.
Alright, that was a video. Thank you so much for watching this far. I always have a good time making videos, but having you guys along for the ride makes it all the sweeter. If you like this video, why don't you check out some of my other videos like this one, where I glaze Dark Souls 1 and its runbacks. Like for the algo, comment for my eyes to see, and subscribe for more cromulent videos to come. And I'll see you in the next one. Peace!